Look at the price we paid. Tens of thousands of Americans, forget everybody else, died because of the rise of Islamism. Look down. Look down over there. You'll see, the Freedom Tower behind us. 3,000 Americans incinerated almost 25 years ago, all because of the Islamists.
Islamic terrorism was invented by Zionist intellectuals. In particular, the first place that's had a major public showing for the first time was a conference in 1984 in Washington, D.C., organized by a certain Benjamin Netanyahu. And the idea there, which is one of the earliest appearances of the idea, was that there's a specifically Muslim form of terrorism, that Muslims are particularly predisposed towards terrorism. Well, so because the Zionists had to push out the Palestinians in order to create a Jewish state, they had to be anti-Palestinian and they had to be anti-Arab. And as a result of that, they also, because the Palestinians are mostly Muslim, not all Muslim, but it's mostly Muslim, they also had to be anti-Muslim. And that's kind of part of the basic genetic code of Zionism, if you like.
Americans don't know anything. We know after 9/11, I think about it now, the propaganda to make me afraid of Muslims. I can't even imagine being a Muslim growing up after 9/11 in America, because I know how I felt about them. But that beating every day in our heads that every Muslim was a terrorist was the idea that you got, that it is so unacceptable. When I go back and I re-examine that propaganda, that brainwashing that took place in the classroom to make me scared. The reason for that, he who controls the textbooks controls the entire country, in my view, right?
There is an Israeli lobby group called the Institute for Curriculum Services, and what they do is they lobby to make changes to the history textbooks in American public schools. And the changes they make hide Israeli war crimes, 75 years of tyranny, and the dispossession of the Palestinians. They also demonize Muslim, Arabs in general.
Said there's weapons of mass destruction, and then they never found them, but in the process they killed 1 million Iraqi civilians, right? And it made us think it's okay to just keep bombing Muslims. That was the purpose to me of that educational propaganda and brainwashing, is that we feel nothing for Muslims if they die. And that's so wrong. As a Christian, it bothers me that I allowed the school system to inform my perspectives, to not care about human beings.
I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
Here is the very true story of what went down on 9/11. There was an instant messaging service that was called Odigo. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. Odigo, O-D-I-G-O. It was Israeli owned and operated, and they had headquarters that were based 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. Now, this is according to Haaretz, published September 26, 2011. So that is 15 days after the attack. It says, Odigo workers were warned of the attacks. That is the headline. And I'm going to read you this piece of the article verbatim. It says, quote, Odigo, the instant messaging service, says that 2 of its workers received messages 2 hours before the Twin Towers attack on September 11th, predicting that the attack would happen. And the company has been cooperating with Israeli and American law enforcement, including the FBI, in trying to find the original sender of the message, predicting the attack, end quote. And that's not all. That's not all. It's going to get even crazier. 2 weeks after 9/11, Alex Diamandis, and by the way, he was Odigo's vice president. This is the vice president of the company. Said that the messages said something big was going to happen in a certain amount of time. And it did.
Building 7. So that building got reported being down 26 minutes before it actually fell. And you get on TV, on BBC, talking about...
Oh, I've seen it.
Talking about how the building is already collapsed and it's right behind her.
Never forget that on 9/11, the British Broadcasting Network announced that Building 7 had collapsed 26 minutes before it had actually fallen.
The 47-story Salomon Brothers building, situated very close to the World Trade Center, has also just collapsed.
As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of
building number 7.
For the first 10 years, I did not think anything other than the official narrative. Then, after being shown a close-up video of building number 7 coming down, it's obvious to me that building 7 was a controlled demolition because the building collapses from the bottom down. They examined the dust and they found what they call thermitic material, which is like an explosive incendiary, which was in the dust samples, and that's documented. There were reports of the buildings were undergoing an extensive elevator renovation in the 2 or 3 years prior to. They had access to the cores of the building. And on the day of the attack, the elevator company would not assist in the operations of the elevators. And
26 minutes later, the building collapsed.
People think what happened to Building 7 seems impossible. A lot of structural engineers have written this and think that seems impossible.
Okay, I've been involved with heavy construction for over 30 years, been involved with the constructions of high-rise steel frame buildings in Manhattan. I know what goes into these buildings. I know what fire loads that they can handle, how fire is going to act. The trade centers were unique in that they were designed to withstand the impact of a jet. From what I understand, the outer skeleton of the building, the outer columns was like a fishnet, and you had these inner core columns which were substantial, thick steel beams to withstand 4 or 5 times what the loads were. No steel frame building has ever collapsed before or since 9/11. It said that Building 7, it was a progressive collapse, that it was caused by fire. But progressive collapse, unlike the Twin Towers collapse from the top down. That's a progressive collapse. Sure. Floor by floor by floor. But if you look at the videos of Building 7 collapsing, it collapses uniformly. It's collapsing from the bottom. The building stays intact all the way to the bottom of the ground. Now, fire doesn't act like that. At one time when I was heavily engaged in trying to get a new investigation, I definitely felt threatened.
The building was powder. But amazingly, they found this passport that proved their narrative.
So you realize how much we relied to about 9/11, like the presence of the Mossad that was there.
That on the morning of 9/11, a lady looked out of her apartment in New Jersey, looking over, and saw 5 Middle Eastern looking men filming it, high-fiving and cheering. She took them to be Arabic. Police eventually tracked them down. They were traveling around in a white van. They were Israelis. They became known as the Dancing Israelis.
It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked.
A witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. Sources tell ABC News, during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. It said they worked for a company called Urban Moving. Not long after the arrests, the offices of Urban Moving were simply abandoned.
Kept in custody for 71 days until the ultra-Zionist head of the criminal division of the Justice Department, Michael Chertoff, released them. Same Michael Chertoff released the 200 arrested in the spy ring, 2 of which were known by the police to be Mossad agents, said that they were there to document the event.
Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to the Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
Despite all of this, all the Israelis were let go without any espionage charges being filed.
I want to say, just like to all Muslims growing up during my time in America, I am sorry on behalf of America
I'm sorry
for the way
too.
that you were treated.